The wind howled like a wounded animal, rain battering the grand windows of the Donovan estate. Standing at the edge of the doorway was Adrian Donovan, unmoved by the storm or the woman shivering in front of him. Her name was Lila. Her dress clung to her, soaked from head to toe, and her arms wrapped protectively around her growing belly, a belly that had once filled Adrian with hope but now seemed to enrage him. Her fingers reached out to him, trembling, clutching at the lapels of his tailored suit like it could keep their life from falling apart. His eyes were cold. No words, no forgiveness. Only disbelief and rage. Please, she begged, her voice cracking under the weight of her fear. Adrian, it's not what you think. But it didn't matter. The letter had said it all, a cruel, merciless letter slipped under his office door. No return address. No explanation. Just a photo, and a message that cut deeper than any betrayal Adrian had ever known. Lila, wrapped in another man's embrace. The timestamp damning. The note beneath it venomous. That child isn't yours. He had confronted her right then, and she denied it, pleaded with him to listen. But he didn't want words. He wanted silence. So, with a bruising grip, he tore her hands off him and shoved her into the storm. Her scream was swallowed by the thunder as the door slammed shut behind her. Lila was gone, erased in a heartbeat. Only a few months earlier, she was everything to him, his anchor in a world filled with corporate wolves and fake smiles. They had danced barefoot on hardwood floors, whispered secrets under skylights, and made vows they thought nothing could break. He used to say he'd never become his father, a man hardened by betrayal and greed. But now, standing in the empty hush of his mansion, Adrian realized he had become exactly that. She had brought light into his life, but that light had been snuffed out by a single photograph. In a moment of weakness, he let vengeance take control. Everything she owned was discarded. Her name removed from legal documents. Her presence wiped from his home. She didn't get money, closure, or even a chance to explain. His security team ensured she wouldn't come back. He called it justice. He told himself he had protected himself. And as time went on, his empire soared. New companies, more acclaim, endless wealth. But love? Love was for fools, and Adrian vowed never to be one again. Years passed, and he built his legacy higher than ever. A name everyone respected, a man people envied. Women came and went, models, heiresses, socialites, but none touched his heart. No one got close enough. He had locked his emotions away in a vault he refused to open. The media called him untouchable. But in his quiet moments, when the lights were off and the house was silent, he sometimes heard her voice. The way she begged. The way she cried. Her voice haunted the edges of his peace. He tried to forget her. He buried her memory beneath board meetings and billion-dollar contracts. But fate had other plans. It was at a black-tie fundraiser, the kind where champagne flowed like water and power whispered through every handshake. The air was thick with ambition and perfume. That's when he saw her. Lila. She didn't look broken. She didn't look ruined. She looked radiant, poised, elegant, with a quiet confidence that stunned him more than any confrontation could. But it wasn't her glow that stopped his breath. It was the boy by her side. A small child, no older than 6, holding her hand tightly. Adrian froze. The child turned slightly, and that's when it hit him, those eyes. Gray. Sharp. Focused. His eyes. A perfect replica of his own. The gala disappeared. The music. The crowd. The clinking glasses. All faded into white noise. All that existed was the impossible truth standing just feet away. The boy was his. He had to be. Adrian's heartbeat pounded so hard it echoed in his ears. That wasn't just some stranger's child. That was the boy he had rejected before he ever knew he existed. The son he'd thrown away with his mother. Lila met his gaze calm, unreadable. No emotion showed on her face. No welcome. No malice. Just stillness. And in that stillness, Adrian unraveled. Everything he thought he knew was suddenly a lie. Doubt seeped in, slow and sickening. What if the photo had been fake? What if the letter was planted? What if he had ruined everything based on a lie? The child tugged at Lila's sleeve and whispered something. She bent down, nodding with a faint smile. It was a mother's smile, and it hit Adrian like a freight train. That could have been his life, his family, his legacy. But he destroyed it, burned it to the ground before the truth ever had a chance. Before we continue the story, if you're new here, please consider subscribing to our channel. It really helps us keep making stories like this. Adrian tried to move but couldn't, his legs rooted to the polished floor. He had faced cutthroat executives, toppled companies, crushed competitors, but nothing prepared him for the fear of losing something he never even knew he had. Lila didn't acknowledge him again. She turned, took her son's hand, and walked away as if he was just another name in her past. Adrian stood there, alone in a sea of black suits and curious stares, his mind screaming for answers. That night marked the beginning of his obsession. Adrian couldn't sleep that night. He lay in his penthouse suite, staring at the ceiling while the city below pulsed with light and motion. But his mind was still at the gala, still trapped in the moment Lila turned away with the boy, his boy. He replayed every second, every detail, searching for something he missed. The way the child held her hand, the expression in Lila's eyes, the way neither of them flinched when they saw him. They weren't afraid. They had moved on. Without him, he pored over everything he could remember about that night. Who she talked to, where she stood, what she wore. He needed answers. Obsession settled into his bones like a sickness. He tried to convince himself it wasn't about Lila. It was about the boy, his son. The child he never got to meet, never got to name, never got to love. The next day, Adrian's assistant found him in his office, eyes bloodshot, tie loosened, old photographs spread across his desk. He was already on the phone with a private investigator. "I want everything," he said coldly. "Where she's been, who helped her disappear, and most importantly, who told me she cheated." The days stretched into weeks. Files were delivered in sealed folders. Names, addresses, timelines. And still, nothing. Lila had vanished completely after that stormy night. No bank accounts in her name. No leases. No employment records. Whoever helped her disappear had done it professionally. Clean. Adrian grew more frustrated by the day. He wasn't used to not knowing, not being in control. In his world, everything could be fixed with power, money, or fear. But this ghost trail made him feel powerless. And he hated it. But then, finally, a breakthrough. A small receipt from a clinic in upstate New York. A woman matching Lila's description. The date? 6 months after he kicked her out. And the listed emergency contact? A name that hit him like a punch. Logan Reed. His longtime business associate. A man he had trusted. A man he had welcomed into his inner circle. The betrayal stung worse than he imagined. He confronted Logan the next morning, stormed into his glass-walled office without knocking. The man barely had time to stand before Adrian threw the receipt onto his desk. Logan paled. "You helped her disappear," Adrian said, his voice low and lethal. "You were behind the letter, weren't you?" Logan tried to explain, said it wasn't like that. That Lila had nowhere to go. That he had only helped her out of kindness. But Adrian knew better. He saw the guilt in his eyes, heard the hesitation in his voice. Logan had known exactly what he was doing. Whether it was jealousy, greed, or some twisted form of revenge, he had turned Adrian's life upside down with a lie. It all unraveled from there. The anonymous letter, the photo, the sudden silence. Logan had orchestrated it all, planting doubt, feeding the fire, then disappearing from the fallout. He had stolen not just Adrian's trust but his future. Adrian fired him on the spot. No words. No negotiation. Just cold dismissal. But even as Logan walked away, had lowered in disgrace, Adrian knew the damage had already been done. He couldn't rewind time. Couldn't take back what he had done to Lila. The truth hit him like a collapsing skyscraper. She had never betrayed him. Not once. He had built a fortress out of lies, burned the only woman he ever loved, and erased a son he never got to meet. It wasn't just regret anymore. It was grief and guilt. and rage not at Lila, but at himself. He spent the next few days drowning in memories. Their first date. The way she used to laugh at his awful jokes. The way her hand used to rest on her belly in those early weeks of pregnancy, as if guarding something sacred. He remembered her whispering, "He's going to have your eyes." And now, he knew she had been right. Adrian began leaving his office early, driving around the city in silence. He stopped outside schools, parks, hospitals hoping for a glimpse. Once, he spotted them through a bakery window. Lila and the boy, laughing over cupcakes. It was a normal moment. Ordinary. But to Adrian it was everything. He didn't approach them. He couldn't. What would he say? "I'm sorry for throwing you into a thunderstorm while you were pregnant with our son?"
No.
He had no right.
Not yet.
Maybe not ever. Instead, he started small. Donations were anonymously made to the clinic that helped her. Scholarships were established in her maiden name. He ensured her address, once found through a quiet favor, had full security coverage. Unseen. Unnoticed. But always there. He wasn't trying to win her
back.
He was trying to be the man she once believed he could be. Adrian began writing letters. Hundreds. All addressed to his son. Never sent. Letters filled with apologies, stories, regrets, and hope.
Some were just a few lines.
Others were pages long. But they all shared the same truth. He never stopped loving him. Even when he didn't know he existed. He started attending therapy secretly. Something the old Adrian would have mocked. But he was tired of being that man. The ruthless machine. The stone-faced mogul. He wanted something real. Something human. Something that had been taken from him by his own hand. One night, as he sat in his study surrounded by silence, Adrian whispered aloud, "I don't want forgiveness. I just want a chance to do right by him." That was the beginning of the next chapter. A quiet, humble pursuit not of love, but of fatherhood. The following months were slow, deliberate, and filled with restraint. Adrian never approached Lila, or the boy directly, not once. He understood now that showing up uninvited would only reawaken wounds she had every right to keep closed. Instead, he watched from afar, not as a stalker, but as a man quietly mourning a life he had shattered and vowing not to break it further. His investigators were dismissed. He no longer needed reports or surveillance. He just needed moments, small, passing glimpses that reminded him of what he once had and what he now hoped to earn back. He learned the boy's name by accident, a birthday banner across a park playground. "Happy 7th, Micah," it read, as children ran through balloon arches. Adrian watched from across the street. A quiet smile played on his lips as Micah blew out candles, Lila clapping beside him, her eyes bright. She had built a whole life without him. A good one. And somehow, that made Adrian both proud and ashamed. Micah had his eyes. Yes, but his joy, his confidence, that was Lila. She had raised him into a beautiful soul. Without help. Without Adrian's support. And yet, she'd never turned bitter. Never publicly attacked him. Never tried to ruin him. Even though she had every reason to. That silence, that quiet dignity became the loudest thing in Adrian's world. He began volunteering anonymously at children's literacy events. Not to find Micah, but to understand him, the world he lived in, the books he loved, the laughter he shared. It was his way of learning to become a father, even from a distance. One afternoon, fate twisted just enough to bring them face to face again. It was at a bookstore, a local charity drive for underprivileged kids. Adrian had offered to sponsor quietly, attending in the background. But when he turned a corner near the children's section, there she was. Lila. Alone.
No makeup. No entouraje.
Just a mother scanning titles on a shelf. She saw him before he could hide. For a moment, they both froze. Then she walked away.
No confrontación.
No words. Just quiet dismissal. And it stung more than any insult. He didn't chase her. He didn't call out. He just stood there, hand still reaching toward a copy of Where the Wild Things Are, trying to remember how to breathe. That night, he wrote Micah another letter longer than most. In it, he didn't write as Adrian Donovan the businessman. He wrote as the broken man who once made the worst decision of his life during a rainstorm and had been paying for it ever since. A few weeks later, something changed. Lila sent him an email.
No greeting. No signature.
Just one line. He's old enough now. He's asking questions. It hit Adrian like a wrecking ball. She was giving him a chance. A small one. Maybe temporary. Maybe fragile. But it was there. He didn't reply right away. He spent hours drafting a response, then deleting it. He didn't want to come across as pleading, or smug, or apologetic in the wrong way. In the end, he replied simply, "Whenever you're ready, I'll follow your lead." They met in a neutral cafe.
Public. Quiet.
Safe. Lila arrived first, and Adrian followed 5 minutes later. They sat in silence for several long moments before she spoke.
You were lied to, she said.
I know, Adrian replied softly. Do you have any idea what you cost us? His throat tightened. Every day. Her eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears away. Micah thinks you're a soldier, that you went away to protect something bigger than yourself. I didn't have the heart to tell him the truth. Adrian lowered his gaze. Maybe that version of me would have been a better father. She shook her head.
No.
He deserves the real one, flaws and all. But if you want to be in his life, you don't get to show up and play hero. You show up and prove you're worth knowing. I will, he said, barely above a whisper. I don't want to fix the past. I just want to show him he matters. Lila nodded slowly. Then start with 1 hour a week. Public spaces. My rules. He agreed instantly. The first meeting was awkward. Micah was polite, cautious, clearly confused. Adrian didn't push. He let the boy talk about dinosaurs, soccer, and his new science kit. Lila watched from a bench nearby, unreadable. Adrian's only goal that day was to listen and to remember the sound of his son's voice. 1 hour turned into 2. Then a weekly visit became a routine. Parks, zoos, even a kid-friendly cooking class where Adrian nearly burned a grilled cheese and Micah laughed until he hiccuped. With every small step, Adrian began to feel something shift inside him. It wasn't just guilt anymore. It was love. Real, uncomplicated love. And though Lila still kept her distance, he noticed the moments when her gaze softened. When she smiled watching Micah wrap his arms around Adrian's waist. Those moments gave him hope. But he knew the road ahead was long. And just when he thought peace was finally within reach, the past reared its head again. Lucas. The man who orchestrated the lie. The man who had taken everything from Adrian. He wasn't finished. It started with a news article buried deep in the financial section. Former tech mogul Lucas Grant launches new venture abroad. Adrian's jaw tightened as he read the headline. Lucas, the very man who destroyed his family, was back. And worse, he was positioning himself as a reformed philanthropist, gaining press attention for a new ethics-driven startup in Singapore. Adrian knew better. This wasn't redemption. This was rebranding. A cover. He had spent months rebuilding trust with Micah, carefully following every boundary Lila had set. But now, with Lucas emerging from the shadows, Adrian felt the fragile peace he was constructing begin to tremble. He couldn't ignore it. Lucas had stolen too much already: his love, his son, and nearly his legacy. He needed to act. But this time, he wouldn't act out of rage. He'd act with precision. Adrian quietly pulled together a small, trusted team: forensic accountants, legal experts, and one old friend who owed him a favor from their days in Silicon Valley. They began tracking Lucas's new company, digging into funding sources, tracing shell corporations, and watching for patterns. And the patterns were there, disguised beneath charity, masked by buzzwords. Fraud, tax evasion, international laundering, all carefully veiled behind smiling interviews and social media fluff. Adrian didn't plan to go public yet. He had learned patience. But every late-night file and every flagged transaction added fuel to a fire he refused to ignore. Meanwhile, Micah was changing. He had grown more confident with Adrian, asking questions, seeking advice, even texting him at random about school projects or his favorite comic book heroes. They had built inside jokes, Small rituals like frozen yogurt every third visit and picking one question of the day from a mystery jar Adrian had made. Lila saw it too. Though she never said it out loud, her posture softened. Her boundaries loosened. She even accepted a coffee from Adrian one morning, a silent gesture that meant more than she probably realized. But the real test came unexpectedly. Micah got sick. Not a cold, not a stomach bug, a seizure. It happened at school. The nurse called Lila first, then Adrian. They both arrived at the hospital within minutes of each other. Lila looked terrified, her hands trembling as she signed paperwork. Adrian stepped in quietly, helping steady her hand. "I'm here," he said, and for the first time, she didn't flinch at his touch. They waited together in a sterile room, the clock ticking louder than it should have. The doctor entered, his face serious but calm. "It looks like a minor seizure, possibly stress-triggered. We'll run more tests, but for now, he's stable." Lila exhaled sharply, tears spilling from her eyes. Adrian stood frozen, unsure whether to comfort her. But then she reached for him, not as a lover, not as a former enemy, but as a parent, terrified and exhausted. He held her, and she didn't let go. Micah woke up groggy but smiling. "Did I miss math class?" he joked weakly, and they both laughed even through their tears. That night, Adrian stayed at the hospital, sleeping in a chair by Micah's bed while Lila dozed on the couch. In the morning, he woke up to find Micah's hand holding his. The boy was still asleep, but that small gesture, innocent, warm, made everything else fade away.
The past.
The betrayal. Even Lucas. Adrian knew what he was fighting for now. Not just revenge. Not redemption. Family. The next week, Lila invited him over for dinner. No staff. No security.
Just them.
It wasn't a date. It wasn't reconciliation. It was a test one Adrian didn't dare fail. He brought Micah's favorite dessert, let the boy beat him at board games, and wash dishes while Lila dried. It was mundane. Beautifully mundane. And in that quiet domesticity, Adrian saw a version of life he'd thought he lost forever. As he left that night, Lila stood in the doorway just like she had all those years ago during the storm. Only this time, her eyes weren't filled with fear. They were uncertain, but not closed. "I don't know what this is," she said softly, "but Micah's happy. That matters." Adrian nodded. "It's enough. For now." But peace doesn't last forever. 2 days later, Adrian received a message from his legal team. Lucas had just filed a lawsuit alleging defamation, breach of contract, and theft of intellectual property. It was a clear move. Lucas had sensed the investigation closing in and was striking first, trying to frame Adrian as the aggressor. The headlines would be ugly. The public sympathy might sway. But Adrian had been through worse. He forwarded the message to Lila. Her reply was instant. "Let's fight him together." And just like that, they were allies again, not out of love, but for something bigger than both of them. Truth. Justice. A future. The courtroom was colder than it needed to be, all glass and marble, designed to intimidate. Reporters filled the gallery, cameras waiting for the next scandal to unfold. Adrian sat at the plaintiff's table, tailored suit pressed, jaw tense. Across the aisle sat Lucas, smug in his arrogance, flanked by attorneys who had no idea they were about to go down with him. And behind Adrian, just 2 rows back, sat Lila and Micah. They weren't there for show. They were there for truth. Adrian had prepared for this moment. Every document, every fake transaction, every forged signature, all compiled into a case that would blow Lucas's facade to pieces. But none of it mattered more than what came next. The judge nodded. "Call your first witness." Lila stood. There was a shift in the air as she walked to the stand.
Calm. Composed.
No anger in her face, just truth. She took the oath, sat down, and looked directly at Lucas. And then she began. She spoke of the night she was thrown out, the pain of being silenced, the fear of carrying a child alone. She spoke of the anonymous letter and how it shattered a home that once held so much promise. She never raised her voice, never dramatized. She simply told the truth. And then she said the one thing no one expected. I have proof that Lucas Grant orchestrated the entire deception. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. She handed over a flash drive emails, voice messages, and one damning video of Lucas gloating during a private party, drunkenly bragging about cutting Donovan off at the knees and burying the girl before she could ruin the game. It was enough. More than enough. Lucas's lawyer immediately requested a recess. The judge refused. The evidence was too clear. Too final. Lucas's mask cracked. He stood, yelling that it was all fake, that Lila had doctored the files, that Adrian was paying her, that everyone was against him. But the more he shouted, the more pathetic he looked. And then came the final blow. Adrian stood, walked to the front of the courtroom, and played a voicemail one Lucas had accidentally left on a mutual acquaintance's phone. In it, Lucas mocked Adrian's grief, called Micah the golden token, and laughed about how easy it was to ruin a man who trusted too much. The courtroom fell silent. Lucas sat down slowly, as if truly realizing that this was the end. The trial wrapped quickly after that. Lucas was indicted on multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy. His assets frozen. His name wiped from corporate boards. His future gone in a single verdict. Outside the courthouse, the press swarmed. Adrian didn't speak. Neither did Lila. But Micah, standing between them, whispered to his mom, "Did we win?" Lila knelt beside him. "We didn't win, baby. We just told the truth." And somehow that was better. The following days were quiet. No shots. No press. Just space to breathe. Lila invited Adrian over again, not for dinner, but for a conversation. They sat on the back porch, a gentle breeze rustling the trees. Micah was inside, watching cartoons, unaware of how heavy the moment was. "I never expected to forgive you," Lila began. "And I'm not sure I have. Not fully." Adrian nodded. "You don't have to. But you've changed," she added. "And Micah sees it. He trusts you. I don't want to let him down." "Then don't," she said simply. "This isn't about us. It's about him." Adrian took a deep breath. "Can I be part of his life, more than just visits?" Lila was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You can come to his school recital next week. Sit with me. No drama. Just be there." He almost cried from those simple words. "I'll be there. I promise." The recital was messy and adorable, 20 kids in animal costumes singing off-key songs with wild hand motions. Adrian sat beside Lila, clapping, laughing, even wiping a tear when Micah waved directly at them during his solo line. Afterward, they went for ice cream. Just the three of them. Micah talked nonstop. About music class, his science project, his best friend Liam. And as he leaned his head on Adrian's arm, sticky with vanilla fudge, Lila caught Adrian's eye. She smiled. A real smile. Not forgiveness. Not love reborn. But something just as powerful. Understanding. A week later, Adrian handed her a manila envelope. Inside was a trust fund, substantial, but not flashy, set up in Micah's name. "No strings. No hidden clauses. Just a promise." "I know I can't undo the past," Adrian said. "But I can try to make his future better." Lila closed the envelope and held it tight. "You already are."
And that was enough. For now.
Adrian didn't return to the boardroom after the trial. His team expected a victory lap, a press tour, maybe a book deal. Instead, he cleared out his office quietly, handed the keys to his second-in-command, and walked away. Not in defeat, in peace. For the first time in years, he didn't need the empire. He just needed clarity. He spent his days differently now. School pickups, volunteer shifts, coaching Micah's weekend soccer team, even though he barely knew the rules. It wasn't perfect. He stumbled through parenting, awkwardly navigating conversations about homework and bedtime, and which cartoon characters were cringe. But Micah didn't care. He just wanted his dad there. And Adrian was fully. Lila noticed. She didn't say anything at first, but the change was undeniable. Adrian was no longer trying to fix the past with grand gestures. He was present.
Consistent. Human.
They shared meals occasionally, usually leftovers after long days. They didn't label whatever they were building. It wasn't a relationship. Not yet. It was something gentler. Something real. One Saturday, while Micah was at a sleepover, Adrian and Lila found themselves alone for the first time in months. They sat on the couch, sharing a bottle of wine and laughing over childhood stories. There was no pressure, just comfort. "You ever think about what we lost?" Lila asked quietly, not looking at him. "All the time," Adrian said. "But I think more about what we could still build." She nodded slowly. "Micah asked me yesterday if we're a family now." Adrian's heart stopped. "What did you say?" "I told him we're trying." And that was true. Adrian never tried to replace the past anymore. He just focused on the present. And in doing so, something incredible happened. Micah blossomed. His grades improved. His smile grew brighter. He even told his teacher during a class project, "My dad's the best at making grilled cheese. He used to be a big boss, but now he's just my dad." It was the best compliment Adrian had ever received. But peace is rarely permanent. A letter arrived.
No stamp.
No name. Just a thin envelope slipped under Lila's door one evening. Inside were copies of wire transfers, bank documents, and a note. "Your so-called redemption isn't real. He's still hiding things." Lila froze. The handwriting was familiar. Too familiar. Logan. She hadn't heard his name in months. After the courtroom fallout, he had vanished. Rumors swirled of a failed startup overseas, tax evasion charges, and an extradition request. But nothing concrete. Until now. She brought the documents to Adrian. He paled as he read them. "They're from my old accounts," he said, voice low. "Ones I closed after the lawsuit. But these look recent." "Are they fake?" "They're real," he admitted. "But I didn't send them." Lila looked him in the eye. "Then who did?" It took days to figure it out. With help from his remaining legal contacts, Adrian discovered the transfers were made using credentials tied to Lucas's final days before arrest. A last move, a poisoned seed planted to sprout after his fall, designed to make Adrian look corrupt again, to fracture the fragile trust he'd rebuilt. Logan was the messenger, but Lucas was still pulling strings. Adrian could have buried it, could have explained it away, and hoped for the best. But instead, he made a bold decision. He called a press conference. The media, hungry for any scandal, swarmed the event. Adrian stood before the cameras, holding the documents. "These papers are real," he began. "But they do not represent who I am now. They were created using credentials I failed to properly close, a mistake I take full responsibility for." He paused, looking directly at the lenses. "I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to be accountable. Because redemption doesn't mean hiding your mistakes. It means owning them even when they're ugly." The crowd was stunned.
No spin. No excuses.
Just truth. That night, the internet exploded, but not in outrage. In support. Hashtags trended. For the first time, the world wasn't watching Adrian Donovan fall. They were watching him rise. Lila sat beside him on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling through comments. "Looks like people believe you," she said. "I don't care about people," he replied. "I care about you. And Micah." She looked at him for a long moment. "I believe you too." He exhaled, long and shaky. "I don't know what's next." She took his hand. "That's the point. We figure out together." Micah came running down the hall, waving his science fair ribbon. "Second place. Audria." And scooped him up, laughing. "Second? That's first in my book." And in that moment, messy, imperfect, and full of hope, they were a family. Not the kind built from fairy tales or flawless beginnings, but the kind built from surviving storms and choosing to keep walking through them. The auditorium buzzed with quiet chatter and the rustling of folding programs. Micah stood backstage, nervous but grinning, wearing a hand-painted cardboard star over his t-shirt for the third-grade class play. Adrian adjusted the crooked point at the top, laughing softly. "You look like the brightest one up there." Micah beamed. "You're gonna sit in the front row, right?" Adrian nodded. "Wouldn't miss it for anything." Lila stood beside them, arms crossed, a soft smile playing on her lips. "Don't forget to actually record it this time." Adrian held up his phone. Already triple-checked. It was the small things now, the normal, quiet moments that meant everything. The courtroom victories, the scandals, the headlines, they'd faded into the background. What mattered now was presence. Being here. Showing up. When Micah ran off to join his classmates, Adrian turned to Lila. "Do you ever think we made it?" She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "Through it all. The betrayal. The damage. The years apart. Do you think we made it out the other side?" Lila didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I think we're still walking through it. But we're not walking alone." And that, for Adrian, was enough. The lights dimmed. The music started. And for 20 adorable, chaotic minutes, a group of elementary schoolers reenacted the solar system's formation with papier-mâché planets and glittery chaos. Micah delivered his single line, "The stars guide us home." With proud enthusiasm, Adrian recorded every second. After the show, parents and teachers mingled, and kids darted through the aisles. Micah, still flushed with excitement, tugged Adrian toward the cookie table. "Did you see me? Did you hear my line?" "Buddy," Adrian said, crouching down, "I heard it so well, I think I saw Jupiter flinch." Micah laughed so hard, he dropped his juice pouch. Lila watched them from a few feet away, her eyes soft.
But the peace didn't last.
A woman in a crisp blazer approached from the crowd, a familiar unease riding on her shoulders. "Mr. Donovan?" she asked. Adrian stood. "Yes. I represent the Department of Justice," she said calmly. "You're not in trouble. But we believe you may have critical information regarding Lucas Grant's offshore accounts." Lila stepped closer. "Is this about the old money trails?" The woman nodded. "We've traced some of his remaining assets through names and companies once tied to your firm. You're not implicated, but we'll need your cooperation." Adrian didn't hesitate. "Anything you need." That evening, after putting Micah to bed, Adrian sat with Lila in her kitchen. The dishes were done. The lights were low. "You're going to testify again, aren't you?" she asked.
Yes.
"But this time, I'm not doing it to defend myself," he said. "I'm doing it to make sure Lucas never crawls out of his hole again." She nodded. "Good." He paused. "I don't want this to pull us back into the mess. Not again." Lila gave a small smile. "We're stronger now. All of us. And Micah, he's watching how we handle it. Let's show him what real strength looks like." Weeks later, Adrian stood once more in front of a courtroom, this time not as the accused, not as the wounded, but as the man who had finally learned the cost of silence and the value of truth. His testimony helped seal the final indictment against Lucas, whose last financial shelters crumbled under federal scrutiny.
There were no cameras this time.
No media circus. Just quiet final justice. Afterward, Adrian didn't celebrate. He went straight to Micah's school to pick him up early. They went for milkshakes. On the drive home, Micah looked out the window and asked, "Are you done with all the court stuff?" "Yeah," Adrian said. "That part's over." Micah nodded.
Cool.
"Can we go to the aquarium this weekend?" Adrian laughed. "Absolutely." That night, Lila found a small envelope on her front porch. Inside was a handwritten letter, the last of hundreds. This one wasn't addressed to Micah. It was for her. "Lila, there's no version of the world where I deserve your forgiveness. And I won't ask for it again. But if you ever wonder who I am now, I'm the man who never stopped loving you. I'm the man who failed once but won't again. If all we ever share again is the love of our son, I will treasure that with my whole life. But if there's ever room for something more, not a return, but something new, I'll be here. I'll be ready. Always. Adrian." She didn't cry.
Not this time.
Instead, she folded the letter neatly and tucked it into the top drawer of her desk. She didn't reply, but she didn't throw it away. And as the days turned to months, the world continued on. Quietly.
Peacefully.
Micah grew. Adrian stayed. Lila healed. And somewhere between school lunches and science fairs, between co-parenting schedules and late-night talks about nothing at all, something began again. Not a romance. Not a second chance. But something better. Something stronger. A foundation built not on the ashes of who they were, but on the people they had become. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and let us know your favorite moment in the comments.